You think you run this place? Back off!
Last warning, stay. Step back. Sir, you're making this worse.
And the law shut him down instantly.
You're not a real cop. You're a quota. The words sliced through the humid afternoon air. Deliberate, venomous. They weren't shouted. That would have been too easy, too dismissible as mere rage. These were spoken with a cold, practiced contempt, each syllable a calculated projectile aimed at the uniform, the badge, and the person wearing it. Officer Lena Hayes didn't flinch. She stood beside her open cruiser door, the engine still ticking softly as it cooled. Her posture was a study in contained authority, feet planted, hands resting lightly on her duty belt, eyes fixed on the young man in the varsity jacket. His jacket, blue and yellow, screamed local high school pride. His posture, chest puffed, middle finger rigidly extended in her direction, screamed something else entirely. Entitlement, arrogance, a lifetime of never being told no curdling into something uglier. The scene was a mundane American tableau turned volatile, a sprawling big-box store parking lot, shopping carts scattered like metal ghosts, the distant cry of a seagull fighting with the hum of distant traffic. It had started over a parking spot of all things. Him in his jacked-up truck blocking 2 spaces, her on her way back from a coffee run, a moment of quiet before her next call, politely asking him to move. It was never about the parking spot. A quota, he repeated, a sneer twisting his features. He took a step closer, his friends snickering from the bed of the truck, phones held aloft, hungry for content. They just let anyone wear the uniform now, huh? Gotta fill those diversity slots. Lena felt the words land, but she didn't let them penetrate. She saw the camera lenses, little black eyes gleaming. She saw the eager, grinning faces of the boys behind him, feeding off his bravado. She saw the elderly woman frozen by her car door a few rows over, fear etched on her face. And she saw him, chest heaving, face flushed with the power of his own performance, utterly convinced of his invincibility. In that suspended second, a silent, screaming question hung between them, a question for everyone watching. How far can you push a person, a symbol, an idea, before the pushback defines you? Before this story goes any further, take a second to subscribe, because stories like this deserve to be heard, not just for the confrontation, but for the quiet humanity that follows. Confrontation hadn't erupted from a vacuum. 20 minutes earlier, Officer Lena Hayes' day had been one of routine mundanity. The late shift in the 7th Precinct was often like that. Paperwork, minor traffic violations, a domestic disturbance call that was more sad than violent. She had just filed her report, the clack of the keyboard a familiar rhythm. At 34, Lena had spent a decade on the force, earning her detective shield and then, surprisingly to some, choosing to return to patrol. The street tells the truth, she'd tell her younger sister, a social worker. The desk just files it. Her partner, Mike O'Donnell, a grizzled 25-year veteran with a grandfather's eyes and a linebacker's build, had nudged her shoulder. "Go get the terrible coffee, Hayes, my treat, you've got that look." "What look?" "The look that says the walls are closing in. Go, breathe. It's quiet, quiet." It was a precious commodity, so she'd taken the cruiser, driven the 10 minutes to the shopping plaza on the edge of her sector, a no-man's land of chain stores and asphalt. She'd parked at the far end of the lot, away from the stream of minivans and sedans, wanting just 5 minutes of silence with her subpar brew. The sun was beginning its descent, casting long, dramatic shadows across the concrete. That's when she saw the truck. It was a massive diesel-powered thing, gleaming and new, parked diagonally across 2 handicapped spaces. No placard, no plates, just sheer lazy entitlement. Lena sighed, the brief peace evaporating. She wasn't even on a traffic stop, she was technically on break. but the handicapped spaces, it was a line for her, a small visible line that, when crossed, spoke volumes about respect. She finished her coffee, crumpled the cup, and stepped out. Her approach was calm, measured. She saw the boys then, 4 of them, lounging in the truck bed, laughing. The driver's door was open, and the owner of the jacket was leaning against it, scrolling on his phone. He looked up as she neared, his expression sliding from boredom to annoyance to a flicker of something harder as he registered her uniform, her face. "Afternoon," Lena said, her voice neutral, professional. "You're parked in 2 handicapped spaces. I need you to move the vehicle to a proper spot." He stared at her for a beat too long, a slow smile spreading. "It wasn't friendly. We're just waiting for my buddy. He's grabbing something. Takes 2 minutes. It doesn't take any minutes in a handicapped spot without a permit," Lena said, her tone still even. "Please move the truck." One of the boys in the bed snorted. The driver's smile didn't waver. He pushed off from the door, standing to his full height, which was an inch or 2 taller than Lena. He had the easy, athletic build of a letterman, the kind of kid used to applause. "You're not even on duty, are you? I see you just getting coffee. Why don't you go enjoy it? We'll be gone before you finish." Lena felt the first prickle of tension, the deliberate refusal to acknowledge the request, the casual dismissal of her authority. "This is my last ask. Move the vehicle or I will cite you for the violation and have it towed." His eyes narrowed. The performance was beginning, for his audience. He glanced back at his friends, then at her cruiser. He seemed to be calculating, not the legality, but the optics, the challenge. Fine, whatever. "Officer." He spat the title like it was a joke. He climbed into the truck, fired up the roaring engine, and pulled forward, not into a vacant spot 10 feet away, but directly into the fire lane in front of the store, another violation. He killed the engine and got out, slamming the door. The message was clear: you don't tell me what to do. Lena watched him, a cold clarity settling over her. This was no longer about a parking violation. It was a test, and she knew with a weary certainty that he was far from done. Lena turned back toward her cruiser. The mission was technically accomplished, the handicapped spaces were clear. The smarter, easier path was to get in her car and drive away. Let the fire lane violation go. Avoid the escalation. She'd been trained in de-escalation for a decade, lived it, breathed it. Sometimes winning was walking away. But as her hand touched the handle of her open door, his voice rang out again, louder now, pitched for an audience.
"Yeah, that's right. Walk away. Know your place."
A hot spike of anger, primal and immediate, shot through her veins. She closed her eyes for a fraction of a second, centering herself. Breathe, he's a kid. He's performing. She could hear the shuffling as the boys jumped out of the truck bed, phones now undoubtedly recording. She could feel the eyes of other shoppers, hesitant, watching this unexpected parking lot drama. She turned around slowly. He was standing by his truck, arms crossed over that blue and yellow jacket, a triumphant glint in his eye. He'd gotten her to turn back, point for him. "Is there a problem, sir?" Lena asked, her voice dangerously calm. "Sir," he laughed, looking at his friends. "Hear that? Sir. The problem is you harassing people for no reason, bored, need to fill your ticket quota for the month." And there it was, the predictable track. From disobedience to personal attack. Lena took 2 steps toward him, closing the distance just enough to lower the volume to make it less a spectacle. "You were in violation. I asked you to move. You are now in a fire lane. The interaction is over. Have a good day." She began to turn again, a deliberate, controlled movement. "The interaction is over when I say it's over," he said, his voice dropping, losing its performative edge for something more genuinely hostile. He took 3 quick steps, putting himself between her and her cruiser. "You people are all the same. Get a little power, a little badge, and you think you can disrespect whoever you want." The air changed. The word people hung there, heavy and loaded. His friends had gone quiet, their phones still up, but their smirks slightly frozen. This was veering into territory even they recognized as serious. Lena stopped, facing him fully. "Step away from my vehicle, and from me, right now." "Or what?" he challenged, his chin jutting out. "You gonna shoot me? That's your move, right?" The world narrowed to the space between them. The parking lot sounds faded, the cart clatter, the distant music from a car stereo. All she could hear was the pounding of her own heart in her ears, steady like a drum. She saw the pores on his nose, the faint tremor in his raised hand that he was trying to hide with bravado. He was scared, she realized. Scared of backing down in front of his friends, scared of the narrative breaking. That fear was making him dangerous. "My move," Lena said, her voice so low only he could hear it, "is to ask you one more time to step back and disengage. This is your final warning." He didn't step back. He leaned in. And that's when he said it, the words from the hook, cold and sharp as a razor blade. "You're not a real cop. You're a quota." The cameras were rolling, the audience was breathless. And in that moment, Lena Hayes stood at the precipice of a choice that would define far more than this single, ugly afternoon. The word quota echoed in the space between them. It wasn't just an insult, it was an erasure. It sought to strip her of her 10 years of service, the academy honors, the detective's shield she'd earned, the nights spent comforting victims, the paperwork mountains, the camaraderie, the sacrifice. It reduced her to a checkbox, a demographic statistic, a political prop. The heat of the anger she'd felt earlier cooled into something solid, dense, and immovable: resolve. Lena's expression didn't change. She didn't grit her teeth or narrow her eyes. She simply watched him, her gaze steady, absorbing the hatred without reflecting it. This stillness, this utter lack of reaction, was more unnerving than any shout. It robbed him of the chaotic emotional exchange he was trying to create. "You got nothing to say to that, huh?" he pressed, his confidence wobbling slightly at her silence. He needed the fight. Her calm was a void his anger couldn't fill. "I have plenty to say," Lena said, her voice carrying clearly now for the benefit of the recording phones. "But it will be said at the precinct in the presence of your parents and our legal counsel." His face scrunched in confusion. "What, the precinct? For a parking ticket?" "No," Lena said, finally moving. She took a single deliberate step to the side, around him, toward the driver's side of her cruiser. She never turned her back on him. For obstruction of justice, failure to comply with a lawful order, and disorderly conduct, and given your statements, we'll be adding a hate crime enhancement for the review of the district attorney. The color drained from his face. The phrase hate crime cut through his bluster like a scalpel. His friends lowered their phones, glancing at each other with sudden, genuine alarm. This had just left the realm of internet clout and entered the real world of criminal records and courtrooms. You can't do that," he stammered, the entitlement giving way to a dawning, horrified comprehension. "I didn't touch you. I just said some stuff. It's free speech." Lena opened her cruiser door wider, reaching for the radio microphone clipped to the dash. "Dispatch, this is 7 Adams 16. I need a second unit for a transport at my location, the Homefront parking lot. One in custody for obstruction and disorderly. Advise we may be pursuing bias-based charges." The crackle of the dispatcher's response was loud in the sudden quiet. "Copy, 7 Adams 16, second unit en route, ETA 4 minutes. The boy, his name, Lena would learn, was Tyler Madsen, seemed to shrink inside his varsity jacket. The symbol of his status now felt like a brightly colored target. "You're kidding me. You're arresting me? For words?" Lena finally turned fully to him, her hand resting on her belt, away from her weapon, but in a posture of clear professional control. "No, Tyler, I'm arresting you for your actions. Your decision to disobey a lawful order. Your decision to block my path. Your decision to escalate a simple parking correction into a public disturbance fueled by prejudice. The words are evidence of the intent. Now turn around and place your hands on the hood of my vehicle." It was not a request, it was a command, delivered with an authority that was earned, not borrowed. The power in the parking lot had irrevocably shifted. The bully had crossed a line and found it was not a finish line but a threshold. And on the other side stood not an angry opponent, but the cold, meticulous machinery of justice. For a long, suspended moment, Tyler Madsen didn't move. His hands flexed at his sides, his mind visibly racing, trying to find a script, a loophole, a way to salvage his pride. His friends were statues, their phones now pointed at the ground, the fun definitively over. The elderly woman by her car had been joined by a store employee in a red vest, both watching with hands over their mouths. "I'm not doing that," Tyler whispered, more to himself than to Lena. "You are," Lena replied, her tone leaving no room for negotiation. "Right now, or the charges escalate further. Your choice." The weight of those words, "your choice," landed with a thud. This was the consequence he had never truly believed applied to him. He looked at his friends seeking support, but found only pale, wide-eyed anxiety. He was alone. Slowly, with a stiffness that spoke of utter humiliation, he turned and shuffled to the front of the police cruiser. He placed his palms flat on the hot metal of the hood, his head hanging down. The defiant arch of his spine was gone. Lena approached him with calm, practiced movements. She instructed him to interlace his fingers behind his head. She conducted the pat-down with a professional detachment, removing his wallet, phone, and a set of keys from his pockets. She explained every step before she took it. "I am now going to place you in handcuffs for my safety and yours. They will be double-locked." The cold metal clicked around his wrists, the sound final and metallic. She guided him to the back seat of the cruiser, placing a hand on his head to clear the doorframe. A small procedural kindness that felt, in the moment, like a profound contrast to the venom he'd spewed. As she closed the door, sealing him in the plastic and metal cage, she saw his reflection in the window. He was staring straight ahead, his face a mask of stunned disbelief. The performance was over. The audience was gone. All that was left was the reality of the back of a police car. The second unit, a patrol car with a young officer named Daniels, pulled up, lights flashing silently. Lena briefed him quickly, her voice low. "Need you to transport. Subject is Tyler Madsen. Charges are on the log. Potential bias motivation. He's secured and compliant." Officer Daniels glanced at the sullen figure in the back of Lena's car, then back at her, his expression respectful. "You okay, Hayes?" "I'm fine," she nodded, and she was. The adrenaline was subsiding, leaving a deep, weary sadness in its wake. This wasn't a victory. It was a tragedy in miniature. As Officer Daniels transferred Tyler to his vehicle, Lena walked over to the cluster of boys who flinched as she approached. "You all need to leave. Now, take his truck, one of you with a valid license, and drive it home. Tell his parents to expect a call from the 7th Precinct." They nodded mutely, scrambling. She then walked to the elderly woman and the store employee. "Ma'am, are you all right? Did you witness what happened?" The woman nodded, her eyes kind and worried. "I saw it all, officer, from the beginning. The way he spoke to you, it was awful. You were so patient." "Thank you," Lena said, handing her a business card. "If you're willing, our detectives may contact you for a statement. I appreciate you staying." As the second cruiser pulled away with Tyler, and the boys fumbled with the keys to the big truck, Lena finally returned to her own vehicle. She sat in the driver's seat, closed the door, and let out a long, slow breath that trembled at the edges. The composed mask softened for just a moment in the privacy of her car. She looked at her hands, which were steady. She thought of the word quota, and instead of anger, she felt a profound fatigue. This was the undercurrent she navigated every day, the constant low-grade test. Today it had simply broken the surface. She picked up the radio. Dispatch 7 Adam 16. Transport is en route with 2nd Unit. I'll be returning to the precinct to complete the report, the dispatcher acknowledged. As Lena put the car in drive, she caught her own eyes in the rearview mirror. Tired but clear. She hadn't shouted. She hadn't lowered herself. She had simply and firmly upheld the line. And as she drove away from the now empty parking spot, she knew the real work was just beginning. The 7th Precinct House was a squat brick building that hummed with fluorescent light and low-grade urgency. Lena spent the next 2 hours at her desk, her fingers flying over the keyboard. The report had to be perfect. Every detail, from the angle of the truck and the handicapped spots to the exact phrasing Tyler had used, was documented with clinical precision. She referenced the penal codes for obstruction and disorderly conduct. And then, in a separate supplementary section, she wrote a narrative detailing the bias-based nature of the insults. Sergeant Malik, a tall, somber man with salt and pepper hair, read the report in silence, standing over her desk. He finished, rubbed his brow, and pulled up a chair. Hayes, Sarge, you're pursuing the bias enhancement. Yes, Sergeant. The language was specifically intended to demean my position and person based on race and sex. It wasn't just generic swearing, it was targeted. It goes to the heart of his intent to obstruct and disturb. Malik nodded slowly. I'm not disputing it. I've seen the body cam footage from your cruiser. It's clear as day. He leaned forward, his voice dropping. It's going to be a thing, Lena. You know that, right? The kid's name is Madsen. His father is Richard Madsen. Commercial real estate. Sits on a few charitable boards. Doesn't shy from the media. Lena had known on some level. The truck, the jacket, the sheer unvarnished entitlement, it rarely sprouted from nowhere. I figured it was something like that. He's already called the captain. Twice. Malik sighed. He's demanding to know why his honor student athlete's son is being railroaded over a misunderstanding. He's using words like overreach and political correctness. Lena felt a familiar steeliness return to her spine. The report stands on its own, Sarge. So does the footage, and we have a civilian witness. I know it does, Malik said, holding up a placating hand. And I've got your back. The captain will too, officially. But I'm telling you so you're not blindsided. This is going to get messy before it gets clean. Are you prepared for that? She thought of Tyler's face in the back of the cruiser, the shock giving way to what she suspected was a deep, gnawing fear. She thought of his father, already spinning narratives. I didn't start the mess, Sarge, but I'll see it through. Malik gave her a small, approving nod. Okay, go home, get some rest. You'll likely be called in early tomorrow to speak with Internal Affairs, standard procedure for any potential bias case. As Lena drove home through the darkening streets, the city lights blurring past, the weight of the day settled on her shoulders. Her small apartment felt too quiet. She changed out of her uniform, the stiff fabric giving way to soft sweats, but she couldn't shed the tension. She replayed the encounter in her mind, not with doubt, but with a forensic analysis. Had she missed an earlier de-escalation opportunity? Could she have walked away after he moved from the handicapped spot? Every time her professional conscience answered, no. He had forced the confrontation. He had chosen the path. Her phone buzzed. It was her sister, Maya. Hey, you on the news? Lena's heart skipped a beat. What? A clipped video. Just the part where the kid is yelling at you, calling you a quota. It's going viral on local social media. The caption is something like, out-of-control cop harasses teen for no reason. It's cut before you arrest him. Lena closed her eyes. Of course. The narrative war had already begun, and the first salvo was a deceptive, out-of-context clip from his friends' phones. The full story, his disobedience, his aggression, the entire lead-up, was neatly excised. Great, Lena said, her voice flat. You okay? Maya asked, her tone shifting from concerned sister to protective lioness. I will be. It's just exhausting. "Do you want me to come over?" "No, I'm okay, just need to sleep." But sleep was a long time coming. Lena lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, thinking about quotas and narratives, and the fragile line between justice and perception. The next morning arrived too quickly, ushered in by the blare of her alarm and a dozen missed calls and texts from numbers she didn't recognize. The edited video had, as predicted, gained traction. Local news sites had picked it up with cautious headlines. Viral video shows tense police confrontation with teen. The comment sections were a battlefield. Lena avoided them. She dressed in a crisp, professional pantsuit for her meeting with Internal Affairs, not her uniform, a subtle signal that this was a formal procedure. At the precinct, the atmosphere was different. Glances lingered a little longer. Some colleagues offered supportive nods, others were carefully neutral. The Internal Affairs interview was held in a small, sterile room. Two investigators, a man and a woman, were polite but thorough. They reviewed her report frame by frame against the body camera footage, which captured the entire encounter from the moment she stepped out of her cruiser. "Officer Hayes, at what point did you decide an arrest was necessary?" the female investigator asked. "When he deliberately placed himself between me and my vehicle after I had concluded the interaction and was attempting to leave," Lena replied, her voice even. "That, combined with his escalating and targeted verbal aggression, constituted a physical obstruction and a disorderly disturbance. The bias-based language informed the intent behind the obstruction, making it not just a casual disrespect, but a targeted attempt to provoke and demean to the point of impeding my duties." They asked about her tone, her posture, her use of force, the handcuffs. They asked if she had any prior knowledge of Tyler Madsen. They were, she understood, doing their job. The body cam footage was her strongest ally. It showed her calm, her repeated warnings, his escalating hostility. It showed the moment he called her a quota, clear as a bell. After 2 hours, they thanked her and dismissed her. Sergeant Malik was waiting outside. "Captain wants to see you, and just so you know, Richard Madsen and his lawyer are in the building. They're in with the captain now." Lena took a deep breath and walked to the captain's office. The door was ajar. She could hear a man's voice, loud, indignant. "A gross overreaction, Captain. My son is a good kid. He was stressed about exams, he made a stupid mistake in a heated moment, and now his future is being threatened over a parking ticket. And this hate crime nonsense, it's slanderous." Lena knocked and entered. Captain Vega, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s, sat behind her desk. Standing across from her were a man in an expensive suit, Richard Madsen, and a severe-looking woman with a leather binder, the lawyer. Tyler was there too, slouched in a chair by the window, looking at the floor. He seemed smaller out of his jacket, dressed in a collared shirt, drowning in shame and fear. All eyes turned to Lena. "Officer Hayes, thank you for joining us," Captain Vega said, her tone formal. "Mr. Madsen and his counsel have some concerns about yesterday's incident." Richard Madsen looked Lena up and down, his anger momentarily checked by surprise, as if he'd expected someone different. "You," he stated. "Yes, sir," Lena said. "You're the one who decided to ruin my son's life over some words." "Richard, please," the lawyer interjected, placing a hand on his arm. She turned to Lena. "Officer Hayes, we've reviewed the truncated social media video. We understand there is more context. We're here to see if we can resolve this matter without it going to court. My client is a minor with no record. The alleged language, while regrettable, was spoken in the heat of a confrontation. We believe the charges, particularly the bias-based enhancement, are disproportionate." Lena looked at Captain Vega, who gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. "This is your call, Hayes." Lena turned her gaze to Tyler, who finally glanced up. His eyes were red-rimmed. The bully was gone, leaving a terrified boy in his wake. "The resolution," Lena said carefully, "depends entirely on Tyler." The room held its breath. Tyler looked at his father, at the lawyer, then finally his gaze landed on Lena. There was no defiance left, only a desperate confusion. "What does that mean?" Richard Madsen demanded. "It means," Lena said, addressing Tyler directly, bypassing the suits and the anger, "that the law allows for discretion. But discretion requires accountability, not performance, not legal maneuvering, real, genuine accountability." The lawyer leaned forward. "We are prepared to offer a written apology. Tyler will complete community service. We can make this go away quietly to the benefit of everyone. A public trial helps no one, Officer Hayes. It will be difficult for you, for the department, for Tyler." It was a veiled threat wrapped in a promise of convenience. Lena understood the calculus. Drop the bias enhancement, reduce the charges to a misdemeanor, sweep it under the rug with some quiet service. Tyler's record stays mostly clean, the department avoids a messy public racially charged case, and she gets to move on without the months of depositions and media scrutiny. Captain Vega remained silent, watching Lena. This was the crucible. The easy path was right there, offered up by a high-priced attorney. Lena looked at Tyler again. "A written apology? To who?" "To you, of course," the lawyer said, a hint of impatience in her voice. "Why?" Lena asked, her tone curious, not confrontational. The lawyer blinked. For the disrespect." "The disrespect was against the office I hold and the community I serve," Lena said. "It wasn't a personal insult between two people. It was a public denial of legitimacy. An apology to me in this room changes nothing." Richard Madsen threw his hands up. "What do you want then? Money? A settlement?" The ugliness of the question hung in the air. Captain Vega's lips thinned. Lena didn't flinch. "I want him to understand," Lena said, her voice low but firm. "I want him to understand why his words weren't just heat-of-the-moment insults. I want him to understand what a quota really is. It's not me, it's the pressure his generation will never feel to prove they belong in a room, on a force, in a position every single day. It's the doubt people like him plant with words like that. That's the damage. That's what needs addressing." She turned fully to Tyler. "So here's the choice. We can proceed with the charges as filed. A judge will decide. The video and the witness will be public record. Or you can do something harder. You can voluntarily agree to a restorative justice program." "Restorative justice?" Richard Madsen scoffed. "What is that touchy-feely nonsense?" "It's a process," Captain Vega interjected for the first time, "where the offender meets with affected community representatives to understand the impact of their actions. It's facilitated. It's not a get-out-of-jail-free card. It's often more challenging than court. If successfully completed, the DA can consider it favorably in sentencing or even dismissal, depending on the agreement." Tyler was listening now, his eyes on Lena. "What would I have to do?" "You'd meet with a group," Lena explained. "Officers from diverse backgrounds who could tell you what the word quota feels like when you've earned your place. Community leaders who could explain the history and cost of that kind of rhetoric. And if you're sincere, if you actually listen and engage, you'd then design a project. Not just picking up trash, but something that addresses the harm you caused. Educating your peers, maybe. Then, and only then, would I consider the matter resolved on my end." It was a gamble. It offered Tyler a path, but a brutally honest one. It forced him to stare directly at the poison he'd casually spilled. His father was shaking his head, but Tyler spoke up, his voice a rasp. "And if I do that, the hate crime thing goes away?" "The DA would likely drop the enhancement upon successful completion," Captain Vega confirmed. "The underlying charges could be reduced. Your record would reflect that you chose a path of understanding over defiance." Tyler looked at his father, then at the polished floor. The silence stretched. He wasn't thinking about legal strategy now. He was thinking about sitting in a room, having to explain himself, having to listen. It was, Lena knew, his true moment of fear. "Okay," he whispered. "Tyler, no, we don't have to," his father began. "Dad," Tyler said, looking up. For the first time, there was a flicker of something resembling maturity in his eyes, the dawning horror of true consequence. "I'll do it." In that moment, the trajectory of the story changed. It was no longer about a simple arrest. It was about a reluctant, painful journey toward a glimmer of light. Richard Madsen was furious. He argued with his son in hushed, intense tones in the hallway after the meeting, but Tyler, pale and resolved, held his ground. The lawyer, pragmatic, saw the offer for what it was, a lifeline that avoided a potentially devastating public trial and a permanent bias crime on a juvenile record. She began negotiating the formal terms with the captain and the district attorney's office. Lena walked back to her desk, feeling strangely emptied. She had expected a fight, a drawn-out legal battle. She hadn't expected to offer a door to a different kind of resolution. Sergeant Malik ambled over, leaning on her cubicle wall. "Restorative justice, huh? That's a heavy lift, Hayes. You sure you want to be that involved?" "I'm not involved," Lena said, organizing her papers. "The program facilitators are. I just named the door he has to walk through. What he finds on the other side is up to him. And if he goes through it just to save his skin, performs understanding like he performed arrogance, then the facilitators will see it," Lena said, meeting Malik's gaze. "And the deal is off. The process has checks. It's not a performance. It's an excavation." Over the next week, the formal agreement was drafted and signed. Tyler was formally charged, but the proceedings were suspended pending his completion of the restorative justice program. The viral video, once the full body cam footage was obtained and released by the department, a move Captain Vega authorized to counter the narrative, lost its inflammatory power. The story became more complex, less shareable. It faded from the news cycle. Lena returned to patrol. The familiar rhythm of calls, the mundane and the urgent, was a solace. But she found herself thinking about the upcoming first session. She had been asked, as the directly affected officer, if she wanted to participate in the initial impact meeting. It was voluntary. She'd said yes. The meeting was held in a neutral community center room, not the precinct. There was a circle of chairs. Present were Tyler, his parents, his mother, a silent, anxious woman, was there for the first time, 2 trained facilitators, one a retired judge, the other a community mediator, and 3 community representatives, Officer Daniels, Lena's colleague from the transport who was Hispanic, Mrs. Evans, the elderly woman from the parking lot who had volunteered to participate, and Lena. Tyler looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. The facilitators began explaining the rules. "Speak honestly, listen without defense. This is a dialogue, not a trial." Mrs. Evans spoke first, her voice gentle but firm. "Young man, I was so scared that day. Not of her," she said, pointing to Lena, "but of you. The anger in your voice, it felt like anything could happen. I'm 78. I remember a time when that kind of talk from a white boy to a black woman in authority would have had terrible, terrible ends. To see it now, in my lifetime, it broke my heart. It made me feel like we've gone backwards." Tyler stared at his shoes, his throat working. Officer Daniels spoke next. "You called Officer Hayes a quota. Man, let me tell you what that feels like. I graduated top of my academy class. I have a degree in criminal justice. I've been shot at, I've saved lives, I've comforted kids. And still, sometimes I see the look, the how did you get here? Look. That word, quota, it's a whisper some of us fight every day. It tries to steal our worth. When you shouted it, you weren't just insulting her. You were insulting every person of color who has ever had to work twice as hard for half the credit." The room was silent, heavy with the weight of shared experience. Then, the facilitator turned to Lena. "Officer Hayes, would you like to share the impact of Tyler's actions on you?" Lena looked at Tyler. He finally met her eyes. There was no camera now, no audience, just the painful, quiet truth of the circle. "The words didn't hurt me," Lena began, and Tyler's eyebrows twitched in surprise. "I've heard them before, in whispers, in glances. What hurt was the waste of my time, which could have been spent helping someone who needed it. The waste of your potential, Tyler. You have every advantage. A family, an education, your health. And you chose to spend that capital on hatred, on a performance of superiority that was as flimsy as it was cruel. You made yourself small in that parking lot. Not me, you. And that is the real tragedy I walked away from. Not my injured pride, but the sight of a young man choosing to diminish his own humanity. Tyler's chin trembled. His mother reached over and placed a hand on his arm, tears streaming quietly down her face. His father looked stricken, as if seeing his son, and perhaps himself, in a new and unforgiving light. The facilitator let the silence hold for a long moment. Then she turned to Tyler. Tyler, this is a space for you to respond. Not to explain or defend, but to reflect on what you've heard. What comes up for you? Tyler opened his mouth. Nothing came out. He closed it, swallowed hard, and tried again. His voice, when it finally emerged, was a broken thing, barely audible. I didn't think... He stopped, took a shuddering breath. I didn't think you were real people. The confession, so simple and so devastating, hung in the center of the circle. It was the core of the poison, the dehumanization, the uniform, the skin color, the gender. They had been symbols to him, props in his own drama, not connected to a history of family, a lifetime of effort and feeling. In that moment, the story passed a point of no return. There was no going back to the arrogant boy in the varsity jacket. That boy was gone, shattered by the weight of 3 simple human testimonies. What would emerge from the fragments was the work of the weeks to come. The first session was an earthquake, and the aftershocks defined the following month for Tyler. He was required to attend weekly meetings, sometimes with the full circle, sometimes with just the facilitators. He was given reading material, historical accounts, personal narratives, studies on implicit bias. He met with a black police captain who talked about walking the beat in the 80s, with bottles thrown and slurs shouted, not from criminals, but from everyday citizens who hated the sight of his uniform on his skin. Lena didn't attend all the sessions. Her role was largely done after the impact meeting. But the facilitators kept her updated. They reported that Tyler was, against all his father's initial expectations, engaging. He was asking questions. Awkward, stumbling, sometimes defensive questions, but questions nonetheless. He was writing in a journal. He was, as one facilitator put it, unlearning in real time. His community project began to take shape. He proposed, with guidance, creating a short documentary for his school's social studies class. Not about his story, but about the history of policing in their diverse city, focusing on the stories of the first Black, Hispanic, and female officers. He would have to interview them, listen to their experiences, and compile their histories of resilience that predated him and would outlast him. One afternoon, Lena was finishing paperwork at her desk when Sergeant Malik approached. "Hayes, you've got a visitor at the front desk. It's the Madsen kid. Asks if you have 5 minutes." Lena was surprised. The agreement didn't require direct contact. She hesitated, then nodded. Okay, Tyler was waiting in the civilian lobby, looking out of place and nervous. He was alone. He stood up quickly when he saw her. "Officer Hayes, thank you for seeing me." "Tyler, what can I do for you?" He fumbled with a folder in his hands. I have my first interview for the project next week with Captain Grayson. He said you worked with him when you were in detectives. I was wondering if you had any advice on what to ask. I don't want to mess it up." This was a different boy. The aggression was gone, replaced by a palpable anxiety, a desire to get something right. Lena studied him for a moment. "Sit down," she said, gesturing to the hard plastic chairs. They sat. "Advice? Listen more than you talk. Captain Grayson's stories aren't anecdotes, they're his life. Don't just look for sound bites about hardship. Ask him what kept him going. Ask him about his first partner. Ask him what the word service means to him after 30 years. Tyler was scribbling notes frantically. "Okay, yeah, okay. And Tyler?" He looked up. "He'll know your story. Everyone in the department does. Don't try to hide why you're there. Be honest about it. It'll matter to him." Tyler's cheeks flushed, but he nodded. "I will." He stood up, shuffling his feet. "Also, I'm sorry. I know I said it in the circle, but I mean, I'm really sorry for everything. For the parking, for the words, for wasting your time. The apology was no longer a bargaining chip. It was raw, unpolished, and real. Lena accepted it with a slow nod. Thank you. Now go do the work. The apology is in the follow-through. He left, walking with a purpose he'd lacked before. Lena watched him go, a complicated mix of emotions swirling in her chest. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was the first hint of a bridge being built where there had only been a chasm. Weeks turned into a month. Lena's life moved on. New cases, new challenges. The parking lot incident began to feel more like a strange, impactful dream than a recent memory. She heard snippets about Tyler's progress through the precinct grapevine. He'd interviewed Captain Grayson, and the old captain had been apparently so impressed with the kid's sincere engagement that he'd arranged for him to speak with 2 retired officers, a black woman who'd joined in the 70s and a Latino officer who'd helped found the community outreach program. Tyler's documentary was coming together. He'd enlisted the help of the school's AV club. The project had grown beyond a simple assignment. The history teacher, hearing about it, had suggested presenting it to the entire junior class during an assembly on civil discourse. Then Lena got a call from one of the facilitators. Tyler has asked, and it's up to you entirely, if you would be willing to view the documentary before he presents it. He'd like your feedback. Lena agreed. They met again at the community center, this time in a small media room. Tyler was there with his laptop, looking more nervous than he had the day of his arrest. His parents were not present. It was just the 2 of them and a facilitator. I want you to see it, he said, not meeting her eyes, because you're part of the reason it exists, a big part. He pressed play. The 20-minute film was rough around the edges, but it was powerfully earnest. It opened not with sirens or cliches, but with quiet shots of the city, the neighborhoods, the people. Then came the interviews. Captain Grayson, his voice thick with emotion, talking about having his patrol car vandalized with racial slurs the week he made detective. Officer Maria Flores, retired, laughing through tears as she recounted the male officers who refused to partner with her, and the one who finally did and became her best friend. And others. Their stories were not just about prejudice, but about perseverance, about love for the community, about the slow, grinding work of changing a culture from within. Tyler had woven their narratives together with historical photos and news clippings. He didn't shy away from the darker chapters of policing history, but he focused on the individuals who chose to serve in spite of and to change that legacy. The film ended not with a triumphant fanfare, but with a simple question on a black screen, quoted from Captain Grayson, "The badge doesn't give you authority. Your character does. What character will you bring?" The screen went black.
Room was silent. Tyler stared at his hands, waiting for judgment.
Lena felt a tightness in her throat. The film wasn't about her, but she saw herself in every story. She saw the long line of men and women who had stood where she stood, facing down different versions of Tyler, bearing the weight of the same doubts, fighting for the same legitimacy. He had listened. He had truly heard them. "It's good, Tyler," she said, her voice soft. "It's really good." He looked up, a hesitant hope in his eyes. Yeah, you let them be human, that's the whole point." He let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for weeks. "Thank you." The facilitator smiled. "The assembly is next Thursday. Would you be willing to attend, Officer Hayes, as a guest?" Lena thought about it. Walking into that school, into the auditorium filled with teenagers, many of whom had probably seen the original edited viral video. It would be walking back into the narrative, but on new terms. "I'll be there," she said. The high school auditorium buzzed with the chaotic energy of hundreds of teenagers forced to sit still. Lena stood at the back, in her uniform, alongside Sergeant Malik and Captain Vega, who had both come to show departmental support. Tyler's parents were in the front row, his mother clutching a tissue, his father sitting rigidly. The principal introduced the assembly, framing it as part of a continuing discussion on respect and community. Then he introduced Tyler. A low, knowing murmur rippled through the student body as Tyler walked to the podium, looking pale but determined. The last time most of them had seen him, he was a meme, a symbol of rebellion. Now he stood before them, looking like he hadn't slept. Hi, he began, his voice echoing in the microphone. Most of you know what happened to me a couple months ago. I made a huge mistake. I was disrespectful, arrogant, and I said things to a police officer that were racist and sexist and just wrong. He took a shaky breath. I was charged with a crime, but I was given a chance to try to make things right, not just legally, but actually right. Part of that was learning about the people I had disrespected, not just Officer Hayes, but the whole history of people like her in our city. So, I made this. The lights dimmed and the film began. The auditorium, initially restless, grew still. Lena watched the faces of the students lit by the glow of the screen. She saw boredom turn to curiosity, then to recognition, and for some, to a dawning seriousness. They were seeing their hometown's history. They were seeing the faces of people who served them, not as uniformed robots, but as human beings with stories of struggle and dedication. When the film ended and the lights came up, there was no applause at first, just a profound, thoughtful silence. Then, slowly, applause began, not wild or celebratory, but respectful, genuine. Tyler returned to the podium. So I just want to say, it's easy to say stuff without thinking, to judge people by what they look like or what they wear. I did that, and I was 100% wrong. Officer Hayes didn't just arrest me that day. She showed me what real strength looks like. It's not yelling or making people feel small. It's standing calm in the middle of someone else's storm. It's giving someone a chance to be better even when they don't deserve it. So, thank you to the officers who shared their stories with me. And thank you, Officer Hayes. He looked toward the back of the room, finding Lena. Hundreds of heads turned to follow his gaze. Lena felt every eye on her. She gave a single, small, acknowledging nod. After the assembly, students milled about, some coming up to Tyler, clapping him on the shoulder, asking about the film. Lena, Malik, and Vega prepared to leave. As they neared the exit, Tyler broke away from a group and hurried over. Officer Hayes? She turned. Thank you for coming, he said. It meant a lot. You did the hard work, Tyler, she said. You should be proud of that. He shook his head, a faint, sad smile on his face. Not proud, but maybe a little less ashamed. I have a long way to go. Richard Madsen approached, then his demeanor vastly different from the blustering man in the captain's office. He extended a hand to Lena. She shook it. His grip was firm, his eyes earnest. Officer Hayes, I owe you an apology as well. I was blind. I raised a son who thought the world was his to command, and I didn't see my part in that until it was almost too late. Thank you for not giving up on him. He found his own way, Lena said. My job was just to hold the line. As she walked out into the afternoon sun, the noise of the school fading behind her, Lena felt a chapter closing, not with a bang of vindication, but with the quiet, solid click of a door gently shut. The formal conclusion of the restorative justice program was a final circle meeting. Tyler presented his completed documentary and a written reflection that was, by all accounts, painfully honest. He spoke about the isolation of his former mindset, the hollow confidence it gave him, and the profound relief of letting it go, even though the process was agonizing. The facilitators recommended successful completion. Based on this, the district attorney's office agreed to drop the bias crime enhancement and reduce the original charges to a single count of disorderly conduct, adjudicated as a juvenile diversion. Tyler would have a period of probation, his record would be sealed upon successful completion, and he was required to continue his community engagement by mentoring younger students on the topics he'd explored. It was, in the eyes of the law, resolved. For Lena, Resolution came in smaller, quieter ways. The next time she was in a convenience store on her break, the clerk, an older South Asian man, gave her a free coffee. "I saw the story," he said simply. "You handled that with grace." She tried to pay, but he refused. It wasn't about the coffee. Another time, while responding to a minor fender bender, a young black mother pulled her aside. Her little boy, about 6, was staring wide-eyed at Lena's uniform. "He wants to be a police officer," the mother said, her voice a mix of pride and worry. Lena knelt down, talked to the boy about school, about being brave and kind. As she walked away, she heard the mother say, "See, baby, you can be anything." The quota comment, the one meant to diminish her, had somehow, through the long and public journey of its consequence, done the opposite. It had sparked a conversation in her community that made her visibility not a question, but an answer. She was having lunch with her sister Maya one day, recounting the school assembly. Maya listened, stirring her soup. "So, do you forgive him?" she finally asked. Lena thought for a long moment. "Forgiveness isn't a switch you flip," she said. "It's a path you walk. He's walking his. I'm walking mine. I don't hold hate for him. That would be letting him live in my head rent-free. I feel a cautious hope for him and a renewed commitment for me. What he did was about taking away legitimacy. My job every day is about embodying it. So in a way, he refocused me." Maya smiled. "You sound like a wise old cop in a movie." Lena laughed, the sound light and free. "I feel about 100 years old some days." "But you're still here," Maya said, reaching across the table to squeeze her hand. "Still here," Lena agreed. Months passed. Fall turned to winter. Lena's patrol sector saw the usual seasonal shift, more indoor disputes, holiday-related stress calls. She was partnered with a rookie, a bright-eyed young woman named Chloe, and found herself in the unfamiliar role of mentor, passing on the lessons of patience, observation, and that unshakable calm. One bitterly cold evening, they were called to a disturbance at a fast food restaurant. A man was shouting at the teen workers, upset about a wrong order, his language growing increasingly abusive. When Lena and Chloe entered, the man turned his anger on them. He was white, in his 40s, disheveled. He zeroed in on Lena. "Oh great, now what? You gonna shoot me over a burger? Typical." It was a different tune, but the same melody of rage and prejudice. Chloe stepped forward, her voice tense, ready to engage. Lena put a gentle hand on her arm, stopping her. She looked at the man, really looked. She saw the red-rimmed eyes, the trembling hands, not entirely from anger, the despair beneath the fury. She didn't engage with the insult. She spoke to the core. "Sir, it sounds like you're having a really rough night. Let's get your order fixed first. Then, if you want, we can talk about what's really going on. No one needs to get arrested over a burger." The man deflated like a punctured balloon, his anger dissolving into ragged sobs. It turned out he'd just lost his job. His car had broken down, and the wrong order felt like the final cruel joke of the universe. The restaurant manager fixed his food, comped it. Lena gave him a card for a social services hotline. He left, ashamed, but not in cuffs. Back in the cruiser, Chloe was quiet for a while, then she said, "How did you do that? He was so awful to you." Lena gazed out at the frosty streets. "The words are almost never about you," she said softly. "They're about the pain the person is carrying. My old sergeant used to say, 'Don't take the bait, diagnose the need.' He needed to be heard, not fought." Chloe nodded, absorbing the lesson. Lena realized she was passing on the legacy, not of the confrontation in the parking lot, but of the wisdom that had grown from its soil. The cycle wasn't just of harm, it could also be a cycle of growth. Spring brought an unexpected envelope to Lena's mailbox at the precinct. It was a formal, thick card, an invitation to Tyler Madson's high school graduation. On the back, in messy handwriting, was a note. "Officer Hayes, I know you're busy, but it would mean a lot if you could come. You're part of my story, the part that changed its direction. Tyler." Lena showed it to Sergeant Malik. He grunted. You going? I think I am, she said. The graduation was held on the football field under a perfect blue sky. Rows of folding chairs held proud, cheering families. Lena sat near the back in civilian clothes, a simple dress. She watched the procession of blue and yellow robes. When Tyler's name was called, he walked across the stage, received his diploma, and shook the principal's hand. He didn't look at the crowd, but his posture was straight, sure. After the ceremony, as graduates mingled with families on the field, Tyler found her. He was beaming, a genuine, unburdened smile she'd never seen before. "You came! Congratulations, Tyler," she said, and she meant it. "Thank you for everything. I enlisted the Army. I leave for basic training in August." Lena was surprised. "That's a big commitment." "I know. I want to serve for real. Not the fake tough guy stuff I was doing before. I want to earn a uniform."
He looked at her, his eyes clear. "What you said about character being the real authority, I want to build some." In that moment, Lena saw not the bully, not the terrified kid, but a young man standing at the beginning of his own difficult, honorable path.
The symmetry was not lost on her. He had disrespected a symbol of service, and in his atonement, he had found a call to serve. "Then be a good soldier, Tyler. Listen to your drills. Look out for the person next to you. Your character is yours to build every single day." He nodded, solemn. "I will." They shook hands, a firm, respectful grip between two people who had traveled through a storm to reach an unexpected shore. As she drove away from the school, Lena felt a profound sense of closure. The story had ended not with an arrest record, but with a beginning. Not with destruction, but with a fragile, hard-worn redemption. Justice had not just been punitive, it had been transformative. And in the transformation of Tyler, she saw a reflection of her own resilience, a proof that the line she held was not a wall, but a boundary that could sometimes guide a lost person back to their own humanity. The parking lot is empty now, just as it was that first afternoon. Lena sometimes drives through it on her way to get coffee, a different habit now, a touchstone. The asphalt holds no memory of the shouts, the hateful words, the trembling fear. The sun beats down, shoppers come and go, life flows on in its ordinary, relentless way. But Lena remembers. She remembers not to hold on to the anger, but to hold on to the lesson that strength is a quiet voice in the face of a scream. That authority is earned in the moments when you could abuse it but choose not to. That the most powerful response to hatred is not more hatred, but an unshakable commitment to principle and a surprising, courageous offer of a way forward. The story of the racist bully and the black female cop wasn't a story about a villain and a hero. It was a story about two flawed human beings caught in a collision of ignorance and dignity. One chose, in a moment of severe testing, to wield the system not just as a hammer, but as a scalpel and a mirror. The other, faced with the unbearable reflection of his own smallness, chose the painful path of looking anyway, and of changing what he saw. We live in a world quick to judge, to film, to condemn, to cancel. This story asks us to consider the space after the headline, the long, quiet, untelevised work of accountability, the possibility that sometimes justice and mercy can walk hand in hand, and that a consequence, when crafted with wisdom and intent, can build a bridge where we only expected rubble. Lena Hayes still wears the uniform. She still gets the looks sometimes. She still hears the whispers, but she walks a little taller, not from pride, but from a knowing. The knowing that her peace is not dependent on the absence of storms, but on her ability to stand steady within them. And that sometimes, by standing steady, you can calm the storm for someone else too. The world needs fewer performances of outrage and more demonstrations of grace. Fewer monologues of hate and more dialogues of understanding. It starts in a parking lot. It starts in a school auditorium. It starts in the human heart with the courage to say, I was wrong, and the greater courage to offer, here is how you can be right. This is not an end but a reflection, a reminder that our moments of greatest conflict can become, if we choose, our moments of greatest growth for everyone involved. From which part of the country are you watching this story?